Hey, you. Thanks for tapping into another episode of Untapped Keg. I'm RJ Zimmerman, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Brennan Hilleary. How are you doing, Brennan?
Man, RJ, I'm doing great. Really excited to do this podcast with you. Remember when I met you for the first time and felt like this was going to happen anyway, so I'm glad you officially pulled the trigger.
It was, we're supposed to have what, a 30-minute conversation, and I think it went like 45 to an hour. And it was like, yeah, we need to do this longer form because that would have been a really good podcast or first introduction too. But with that being said, for people who aren't familiar with you, could you give us a little bit of background into who you are, how you got here?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Brennan, as you said, and who I am is I'm somebody who has been through the gauntlet of life and has used what I've learned to serve others. And I'll start with my backstory just because I feel like that's an easier segue than just talking about what I do. And it's also more meaningful. So I was always the kid growing up who didn't really know who he was. I had a really hard time latching on to a certain identity and didn't really have a lot of self-worth. I had two separate households that were polar opposites of each other. So I had one household that was super helicopter parent-like, super controlling, expected a lot of me. And then I had another household that was very neglectful and I never really saw them and I could do whatever I wanted. So from a young age, I learned I had to change who I was in order to be accepted. And that carried over into my high school life. And when I was 15 years old, I was starting to actually feel like I belonged somewhere, which was rare for me. And for all I knew, I was just going to keep going down that path and be a quote unquote normal kid. And I was starting to play some sports. So I was into running and I was also into wrestling, not the WWE kind, but like actual wrestling. And what ended up happening is no matter how much I was going to practice, no matter how much I was training, I was really tired all the time. And being a 15-year-old kid, that wasn't normal. I probably slept 10 hours a day. Didn't it was eating good food, was fueling myself properly. And I also couldn't breathe through my nose for a good 6 months, which also wasn't normal. So, because of that, me and my parents decided, and when I say my parents, the parents I lived with in Illinois were my dad and my stepmom. So, that's what I mean when I say parents. We decided to go to the doctor to get a CT scan just to make sure that there was nothing wrong. And I remember being pretty anxious about this. And I remember like feeling in my gut that I knew something was going to be wrong, but I was trying to ignore it. And I'll never forget the day that we went back into the doctor's office to get the results. The doctor walked in. He had this super sad look on his face. And the first thing he said to me and my parents were, "I'm so sorry. You have the mass. You have a mass the size of a grapefruit in your face, and you have to be admitted to St. Jude right now." So I went from a 15-year-old kid who was worried about whether the girl in class liked me back and was dreading my next track practice because I didn't want to run. I went from worrying about those things to whether I was going to live or die. And that started a whole journey of what I consider to be the hero's journey now, but at the time, just a journey of survival. And yeah, from the time I was 15 to the time I was 17, I had 10 surgeries. I had 30 plus hospital visits. I lost 40 pounds. I stayed in the hospital for months at a time. And I was also being prescribed pain medication. And I didn't realize that pain medication was designed to numb more than just the pain that I was experiencing. It was also suppressing all the emotional things that I wasn't really equipped to process at the time. And during this time where I was having these surgeries and where I was going through this survival experience, my entire town was there for me. All my parents were there for me. I felt more seen and more supported and more loved than any other time in my life up to that point. And I remember almost in a, I guess like guilty way, really loving that because I had never really felt that in my lifetime. And then I had a miraculous recovery when I was 17 years old. So I had a less than 20% chance of survival when I was first going through these surgeries. And I flew out to Pittsburgh and had this surgery, and essentially they were able to remove all the tumor, and everybody was ecstatic. And I expected myself to also be ecstatic, but I wasn't. I almost actually had this guilt of, I think they call it survivor's guilt. I had this guilt of why me? Like, why did I survive that? What was the point of that? And I fell into a really deep depression after I survived all those surgeries. However, in order for me to be able to match the level of excitement and gratitude that everybody expected me to match, I started taking pain medication recreationally because that's the only way I knew how to feel good. And I still didn't know how to process everything that happened to me. So, long story short, that ended me up into rehab. And I spoke at some schools in rehab and was like, okay, cool. Maybe this is a part of why I'm here and what I'm meant to do. Then I was really determined to start rebuilding my life. So that's when the successful switch flipped for me. That's when the high achiever switch flipped for me. I was like, I gotta prove myself. I gotta prove my worth. I gotta like run away, right, from this person that was a drug addict and didn't do shit with his life. So I ended up joining the Marine Corps. I ended up starting this corporate career at a really young age. And then I just started excelling externally. I started becoming really successful, and I replaced my addiction to opiates to an addiction to overworking myself. And that lasted for a long time. I was awesome at my job. I really loved what I did. I was super passionate about it. I was helping people with their nutrition and their supplements, and was overseeing a bunch of people and had the status and was starting to make really good money. And even with all those things, I still felt this emptiness inside of me. And eventually I started to get really exhausted and overwhelmed. And instead of dealing with that, I started taking stimulants. So now I was addicted to overworking and Adderall, right? And Vyvanse to continue to push myself harder and harder and harder. And all of that came to a screeching halt in November of 2022. And I couldn't sustain what I was doing. I had to quit my job, and I hit complete burnout. I was burned out in like 2020, right? And I had pushed it to the last possible second, and I lost everything because I didn't recognize the symptoms of burnout. I thought that burnout was a personal character defect. It's because I wasn't disciplined enough, or I was lazy, or whatever the story I told myself was. And so I waited till the last second. I put in my month notice at my job because I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. And my entire sense of self went with that. I lost everything. I lost all the money I had. I lost my relationship. I lost my house. Everything that I had built over the past 6 years was gone. And had a really hard rock bottom moment where I even wanted to end my life. And throughout that process of being in that dark moment, before I followed through with wanting to end my life, I had a really powerful experience where before I pulled the trigger, God, or whatever you believe in, the higher self, right? The universe said to me in my head, he said, "Do not end your life before you know what it's like to really live it." And I realized at that time I didn't want to die. I just never learned how to really live. I realized that I had no idea who I was. And I was chasing success thinking it was going to bring me fulfillment, and didn't. And then I remember asking myself another question. It's like, okay, well, if I don't know who I am, how do I figure it out? And if I, and then eventually that led to another question of how many other people are experiencing this, right? And then that's what started fueling my drive to start coaching people and to start figuring it out and to start testing and experimenting things in my own life. And long story short, that's taken me down a really long road of self-discovery and experimentation. And now what I do is I'm a business owner. So I own a company called Build Your Power Coaching. And what I do is I'm a burnout prevention coach, and I help high achieving successful business owners or real estate professionals. I help them with stop feeling like their work is consuming their life. I help them with getting out of survival mode. I help them with their time management. I help them with reducing their overwhelm. I help them with figuring out how to take a break without feeling guilty. And I do so much more than that, but that's kind of the basis of what I do. I help the person I used to be. So that is the long version of who I am and what I do.
What a poetic way to end the story that is really powerful, that has all these moments that are incredibly difficult. And it's so understandable how you responded the way you are, but to end that with, I help the person who I used to be, right?
Yeah,
And it's like, damn. Like if only so many people would look at it like I don't have to be this person and I can get to a different level and they start to do the work and everything, and all of a sudden they look back and be like, huh, I am different from how I used to be, and I could extend my hand out to others to be able to provide that support, to provide that guidance that maybe they didn't have.
absolutely. And I feel like that's the only way, right? It's almost
Yeah.
like the only way for us to move forward from something like that is you have to have a purpose that outweighs the trauma and the pain that you've experienced. And I remember what it felt like too before that happened, before I had that drive to help others and serve them. And I call it the messy middle, where I've let go of this person that I've had to be to survive for so long, right? This false self, this version of me that I was conditioned to be. Yet I haven't really discovered who I actually am yet, right? So it's like this weird spiritual purgatory where I'm just I'm just like in this gap where I'm just in this fog. All I know how to do, all I know what to do is just take one step forward and have faith that eventually I'm going to get to the other side of this thing. And um, it requires a complete surrender to the unknown, which I think is why it's so hard for people to do it and to get to that side of not only have I become a different version of myself, but now I can also take the pain I've experienced and alchemize it to help others. And
Mm.
I'd be lying if I said I have it all figured out because I definitely don't. So I just trying to find my way like everybody else.
Not everybody's an enlightened Buddha, right?
Right.
And that's that piece when you start to talk about this, people are like, oh, so you have it all figured out. Fuck no, I
Yeah,
don't,
right.
right? Like I just said my life is an experiment. I didn't say I know what my life is, and this is the law of living a human life, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something that it sounds like you've embraced, that you get to embrace after recognizing that you want to move, you want to do something different, you want to be different, is the possibilities. Like, do
Mhm.
you know what it's going to look like? No. But guess what? It could be a lot of fun to find out.
Yeah, yeah. When I think too, it's all people talk about the unknown a lot, and there's a huge fear of the unknown, right? And
Yeah,
a lot of that
absolutely.
is that's conditioning, right? That's like we're told by the school system we grow up in and by our parents or whoever else in our life that we have to have what we want to do and why we're here and all that stuff figured out by the time we're 18 years old, right? And there's this expectation to have ourselves kind of locked in this path of who we're supposed to be when less of a quarter of our life is even done yet. And because of that expectation, I feel like people don't really know how to practically build faith in themselves and have faith in the unknown, right? And that's one of the biggest things I started to learn when because the high achiever in me, I don't have a problem with discipline, right? I don't have a problem with pain tolerance. I never had a problem with pushing myself to do hard things, right? And that's like self-improvement 1.0 is, yeah, I just got to push harder or be more disciplined or, just hustle and grind my way through it.
Not be lazy.
not be lazy, right? Like always be doing something, always be productive, never waste a second, right? And there's this,
Yes.
and the thing about that is that doesn't fix the problem of faith, right? So if you want to embrace the unknown, it actually requires us to slow down and ask ourselves, well, who am I? Right? Like what are my values? Um, what is in me that I haven't discovered yet? Because if you don't know who you are and the unknown in life and all the crazy things that happen to us, right? All the crazy circumstances we're dealing with externally, when that starts to push us back, inevitably, when we start to feel that resistance, when we start to go through challenges and obstacles, if we don't have a sense of self and we don't know who we are, then there's nothing for us to fall back on, right? There's nothing for us to hold on to.
Hmm.
There's nothing for us to be grounded in, right? So what do? We allow our circumstances to dictate our behavior, which means we become victims, right? We think life is happening to us because we're disconnected from our own life force. We're disconnected from our own true selves. So because of that, we can't see the truth of what's happening around us, right? So what's required to have faith is value-based action. So we need to know what we value, and then we need to take action based off of those things, not based off of validation from others, not based off of these are just some shallow level goals that I have for myself, right? Goals are fine, but if it is not attached to like a version of ourselves we want to become, it's not enough oomph to actually step into unknown territory and get past our comfort zone. So,
Mm, that's such a great point. And, there's something in the truth of living that, external validation, it feels nice. Even if you get to a place where that's not driving
mhm,
why you are acting the way you are, that external validation still feels nice. So it's not
yeah,
the absence of that external validation or even the absence of wanting that external validation.
mhm,
It's just moving from a place of the external validation not being the factor of this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
right.
And like you're talking about the value-based action, um, you know, is that something that you think helps to build confidence in yourself?
Yeah, and I would say even more so than confidence too. So confidence, I think, and self-worth kind of go hand in hand, right? And I think 100%. So I think people think about self-worth as if it and confidence as if it's something we're just like born with, right? So a lot of us have this misconception of like, well, there's some people who are confident and some people who aren't, or some people who have high self-worth and some people who don't. And being the person who has had I was negative in my bank account of self-worth, being that person, I can tell you wholeheartedly that self-worth and confidence are both earned. And not earned in the sense of we don't deserve it, right? And we have to like work really hard for it, but it's earned through taking action that reflects who you are, right? Because like if you don't deposit into yourself and you don't deposit into your value system of like, and you don't prove to yourself over time that you are who you say you are, then there's no way for you to have confidence in who you are, right? The prerequisite to confidence is knowing thyself, right? Like the prerequisite to worth is knowing worthy. So how can you do that if you haven't lived along the guidelines and the values of who you really are your whole
Yeah.
life, right? Like you can't. So you can have cockiness and you can have validation and you can have you can think that you're confident until right something happens in your life where like for me like I lost my job, the thing that I thought I was a super confident person until I lost the thing that gave me an identity, and then all of a sudden I didn't have any confidence in myself, so
Mm.
it wasn't really confidence.
And so for me, you have that self-confidence, you have the self-worth, and then you have self-esteem. And those
Mhm.
three things are independent, right? And I agree with you. Like they are tied together, but they are independent. And you're talking to someone who has also not defined, but described my old self as someone who had negative self-worth.
Hmm.
Like as low as you could get in the self-worth, that's where I was. And so digging out of that hole, um, which it really is, doing that, it feels impossible until you start taking these steps and you start
Hmm.
actually giving yourself praise. Like you give yourself the praise that, oh, that went well. I actually did that okay.
Right.
Oh, that was something that worked out. And I actually consciously made that choice. That's pretty awesome, right? Like those things can push you to a point of being able to raise your self-worth and they stack.
Right. And
That's what it's about.
100%. And I also think that requires us to redefine, a lot of us don't realize we have the power to redefine what success looks like for us,
Hmm.
right? Because I think, you know, a lot of the way our brains are wired in today's society, at least the way mine was wired, was like, okay, well, I can't be happy for myself unless I achieve this external outcome. It's like once I achieve this thing, then I can say, good job, Brennan, right? Like once
Yeah.
I make this sale, once I get the girl, once I go on the date, like once I get there, then that's when I can give myself permission to say, okay, like I'm doing all right, right? So realistically, you're only feeling happy probably like 5% of the time if that's the way that you approach it, right? If you think in your head like the only reason like you only allow yourself to feel good about yourself when you're achieving those things, life is not all about achievement. So it's about how do I define my success differently? Like how do I make it so that I don't only know how to reward myself for when I achieve the thing I want to achieve, but also the process of achieving the thing, the actions that I'm taking to achieve the thing. And that's a hard thing to rewire, right? Especially
Yes.
in this society of instant gratification and cheap dopamine. And literally dopamine is our reward system. So, if I take a drink, right, I can trick myself into anything that I'm doing to be um, helping me grow or helping me accomplish my goals or whatever. Or like being addicted to stress, which is what I talk about a lot, is like you can fill up your day doing meaningless shit, but convince yourself that because you're busy, you're making progress,
Hmm.
right? Which means that you're addicted to being busy. You're not addicted to self-improvement and accomplishing goals. Like
Production.
you're addicted to just movement.
Yeah,
Right? So
absolutely.
there's a lot of different pockets with that. Yeah.
It, there's so much to peel back there, but looking at how, that production and not just that production, but something that can happen when you're starting to grow and you're starting to develop these new skills is you get addicted to the feeling of, oh, I had a breakthrough,
Hmm.
right? I had a breakthrough. I made some movement. And so you're like, oh, I'm not improving myself unless I feel I made a breakthrough. How long
Right.
has it been since my last breakthrough?
Right.
And so, like you're saying, it's how do you break that down to, oh, I noticed this slight change that I did different.
Hmm.
That's the win. That's the success. That's what I need to, take as a moment to show up for myself.
Right.
Like that, yeah, I did do that.
Yeah, and that's so tough. And like, I mean, as far as like the how to, what I've learned so far, and it's funny because like, this is like half and half for me right now. Half the time I'm like, yes, I'm successfully operating in a different way, and then the other half of me is like, oh, there's still survival parts of me that I'm clinging on to, right?
Yes,
So as I'm
absolutely.
making the transition, I can just say what I've been learning. But one thing I think is required is being okay with a lower baseline. So it's like, because I was addicted to stress for so much of my life and I was taking stimulants for so much of my life and my whole life was in fight or flight mode, that became my normal baseline state,
Hmm.
right? Which is like, and it's a certain level of intensity that I was used to. So it's like now when I'm regulated, right? Now when I'm actually like at a baseline that is healthy for a human being, what my mind tells me sometimes is, oh, like this isn't safe, like it's too slow. Like there's too
Yep.
much peace, right? And what I used to do, and I'm working through this now, but what I used to do is I used to create chaos just so I could feel safe.
Hmm.
Right. So I would intentionally, or not intentionally, I would unintentionally, subconsciously make things harder for myself in my life through the form of procrastination or, doing too much caffeine or like hanging out with people I didn't like or whatever it was to make things harder for myself. So I felt like I was overcoming something. So I would make myself struggle more to overcome things. So step one is like we have to figure out how do we regulate our nervous system to where we feel like it's okay for us to feel safe. Like how do we feel safe with feeling safe? You know?
Oh, yes. That is one of those. I heard Trevor Noah explain it, and it was like exactly what you described, right? And when I heard it, I was like, it's my life in a nutshell, which is,
Yeah,
you feel calm in chaos. And then when the calm happens, the chaos inside you starts, and so you externalize it.
exactly.
And it's like, why are you attacking me right now, Trevor Noah? You don't even know me, right?
Right.
I thought
You're supposed to be a comedian.
right. But it was one of those things that just it provided a glimpse into my internal world that I was
Yeah,
like, I can understand why I did these things now. I can give myself that compassion and grace that comes
yeah.
with that, that says, okay, I want to change that. So I know where I want to go to recognize where I am, not where I wish I was, where I am. So, okay, what's the next step that I can take?
And
And it's like,
that's
that's
so
that's
important.
that moment that allows you to create what that next step could be.
Right, because the more we have, and a lot of people in recovery deal with this, a lot of people, they're sober, but they still have a ton of shame from
Hmm.
their past, right? They're shackled by that. They're shackled by the shame. And it's like the whole reason why we use drugs or we use substances that alter our mind and alter our state in the first place is because we want to run away from the feeling of shame. So we have this crazy perception that we can fix the problem with the same energy that created the problem. So we shame ourselves for the person we used to be that shackled us, that made it so we wanted to use drugs to begin with, right? And instead of learning how to process that shame and show ourselves compassion, instead, what we do is we try to fight fire with fire, which, if you want to put a fire out, you got to pour water on it, right?
Yeah.
So it's so interesting because like it's the same analogy for the people I work with a lot of times and who I used to be, which is I think that the way to break free from burnout is to work harder. When working too hard towards the wrong things is the whole reason why I was burned out to begin with, right? So
Yes.
so it's like you really think about the logic in that, and it's like your brain can justify some stupid shit.
Yes, absolutely. Like you want to know the best gymnast on earth? It's your brain.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, and it's like if your brain was like a roommate of yours, you'd be like, this motherfucker's crazy. Like, why do I
Yeah.
listen to him? Like he is not sane at all. But yeah, we give we give that voice in our head where whatever, those emotions that are attached to those thoughts, we give it so much power, right? Because like we have this idea that we think we are that voice and we're not.
Yes.
That's
Yep.
just programming, right?
Yeah, that epiphany that, oh, this thought that comes up automatically isn't me. It's my dad. It's my mom. It's my
Mhm.
teacher. It's my friend who turns out wasn't actually my friend. It was, it's so many different moments. And when you recognize that, it's like, wait, the first few thoughts that come up, those automatic ones, those are the ones that were programmed into you. The thoughts that are actually you are the thoughts that are in response to that.
Absolutely.
And so now when you can break those two things apart and now you can see what I can do different and
Yeah.
you're not attaching yourself to this first thought is actually me. This is how I have to be. This is who I
Right.
am. It's like, no, that's no, 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 that's
Yeah.
not. That's who you
And
were programmed. Yes, and
Exactly. And you cannot, this is really important. So whoever's listening, just write this down. You cannot think your way out of negative thoughts. You cannot fix an overthinking problem by thinking more. You cannot stop giving power to your thoughts by thinking more about the thoughts that you're giving power to. So, whenever you discern the difference between, okay, this is the unconscious bullshit voice, my inner critic, right? The inner critic that I've listened to my whole life. And now you start discerning the difference between inner critic, conscious self. This is, my actual voice. Well, when you first start doing this, the inner critic is going to be really loud,
yes,
right? Because you've been given that critic power for your whole life. You've been acting to reinforce those thoughts, right? So by default, that's going to be super loud, and your conscious thoughts are going to be pretty quiet. So the only way to even the playing field is to start taking more action based off of the conscious thoughts, right? And then all of a sudden, the unconscious crazy person in your head starts getting quieter, and then your conscious mind starts getting louder. But that can't happen through meditation, right? That can't happen through a cold shower, right? Like that can't happen through just sitting there. Like it has to happen through reinforcing the voice in your head that you actually want to listen to, the real you, and then proving to yourself based off what you do in your reality that, oh, this is actually serving me. Like this voice, that's me, and it's actually benefiting my life, right? Because if we don't do that, then we're just going to always go back to what's familiar. And if your familiar is chaos and survival mode, which unfortunately is too many people's familiar, then that's what's going to stay.
if you want different, you have to do different. That's like the simplest form of everything. And that doesn't mean that you can always see the moments where you have to do different. But
Right.
if you see yourself feeling like I want different, like that's going to be what the answer is. And you're right. It's get it. That's why journaling can be so effective
Hmm.
because it gets things out of your head onto your paper and to kind of really highlight and showcase what you're talking about. Take exactly what you tell yourself out of your head and write it down.
Yeah.
Read it out loud and ask yourself if that is the response of a sane person. And then realize, oh, this is actually what's coming up inside of me and not my actual thoughts. They're somebody else's. They're from something else.
Yeah.
What is my actual thought saying? And then when you can consciously write that out, it's like, oh, there is a difference. And I'm not batshit crazy. Just the societal programming, which is really what it comes down to is.
Right.
And now I can do something different.
Right. And it's also too so and even the verbal processors out there, right? So for
Yes.
me, for
Yes.
me, writing, I'll tell you what, I have sucked at writing. So it's not even that I suck at it. It takes me a unreasonable amount of time sometimes to get my thoughts out of my head. So what I like to do is like I'll like record myself
Hmm.
with the recorder app on my phone and just talk through what I'm thinking, and it tends to for me help me unravel the knot in my mind.
Yes.
That's also another, yeah, writing is super powerful. Verbal processing is super powerful. Um, whatever you can do to get some more clarity, but also understand that the highest like clarity really if you want to the fastest way to get clarity is action.
Yes.
That's the
And
fastest.
like that's something that I tell people is the same thing. Like if you don't want to write it down, like record yourself on video or record a voice memo, or there's
Mm,
so many different ways that you can journal, but really the process is taking the things, the thoughts that are inside your mind and externalizing it, putting it
yeah,
somewhere else. And that's such a great point to be able to give people those options.
yeah,
And yeah, like when you start doing, so for me, a lot of the time when I'm really up in my head and I can't get my thoughts quieted,
Hmm.
it's going for a walk.
Hmm.
Going for a walk in nature, big plus. Is not always possible based on where I am.
Hmm.
But I can always at least take 5 minutes
Yeah.
to stand up and walk around, or 10 minutes, or go for a walk around the block for 20 minutes, whatever it is. I can do something with my feet. And now it's like, okay, that is something that'll take my mind and focus it on something else. And then high level idea too for people is if on your walks you feel like you're always thinking the same thoughts, instead of turning right, turn left. Just whatever you do it backwards
Hmm.
and watch how your mind will, it'll change what you think about.
Yeah. Yeah, that pattern interrupt.
Yep.
That's great advice. And I want to even take that further too and ask you this because this is something I deal with my clients all the time, and I'm really curious about your answer. So, how do you give yourself permission to do that
To go for a walk,
when you're
to
overthinking, when you're ruminating, right? Like whenever you're in your head and you're not feeling good and you're feeling stressed, you're feeling that fight or flight, you're feeling that anxiety. So many of the people that I talk to and the version of myself I used to be, and sometimes the version of myself I am now, it's hard for me to even for me to be able to create space and give myself permission to do that is another challenge in itself. So what's your perspective on how to do that for yourself?
so there's a few ways. So one of the ways that it works for me and it works for some of the people that I work with is doing that cost benefit analysis of what's going to benefit me more. Sitting here looking at the same problem, like ruminating in my head,
Hmm.
going for a 10-minute walk, going for a 5-minute walk. Like, or just sitting there, okay, this isn't working.
Hmm.
Okay, it's not working. I'm just going to change my environment, which would be like that little 5-minute walk that we talked about.
Right.
Um, so that's one thing that you can do. But the biggest thing is when you recognize that you are stuck in a loop, is notice that you're stuck in a loop and just
Hmm.
try something different. And that's what it is. Okay, what's a different that I can do? I got to
Right.
do something different.
Yeah.
So get up and go to the bathroom.
Right.
Go just for 2 minutes, give yourself a break. Whatever it is, you just got to stop what you're doing. And that's the permission you have to give yourself, is to do something different. So
Yeah.
what's a different that I can do right now? And then
Absolutely.
it's pulling back on those tools. What are the tools that I have that could be different? Changing
Hmm.
the room I'm in, just standing outside in the sun for 2 minutes, walking for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. There's so many different things, but it's taking these tools and being able to pull that in. But the biggest thing is I am in a loop right now. Okay, what can I do to interrupt this?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that too because obviously breaking the loop is what you got to do. And one thing I also tell my clients as well, and what I've worked on myself is so there's, and I don't know if this I don't know if this is the technical term for it, right? There's decisions that we make, right? Which is like, I need to do this because it's going to benefit me. And what I call those decisions are more like surface level decisions. So it's like, I want to feel better, which is why I want to make this decision.
Hmm.
And the thing about that is a lot of times that's for me personally, sometimes that's not enough because I'm addicted to stress, right? So like I kind of part of me in a fucked up way kind of likes it because what is
Hmm.
that? It gives me an excuse to procrastinate or it gives me an excuse to be a victim, right? Or to be lazy and in a sense, not lazy, but like just like not do the thing that I'm avoiding doing or the thing that caused me to be stuck in the loop. And so one of the things that I also find really helpful with that is making an identity based decision. So it's not enough. If it's not enough for a lot of times, it is enough just to be like, I want to feel better and I want to get out of the loop. But if that's still not enough, ask yourself, how do I do this for future? Like what can I do to better serve future me?
Hmm.
And with my clients, we go over values a lot, right? So let's say your core values are mine are authenticity, curiosity, discipline, and resilience, right? Like those are my core values. So it's like, what can I do that's going to help reinforce the values that I have for myself, right?
Hmm.
And for me, it almost gives me that like I get this like this burst of like willpower or this burst of like power from thinking that, right? Instead of like, oh, I just want to feel better in this moment, it's like I get now it's coming from like, oh, this is who I want to become. And that's been really grounding for me in those moments. And I can't tell you how many times like that has helped me interrupt the loop, you know, as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where like the question, um, like what's going to benefit me the most? Like, and then all of a sudden looking, like you said, into that value based, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, if I look at this based on the values, what's going to benefit me the most in this moment? And it's like,
Hmm.
damn, that's powerful because now you're looking at it from the different angles to
Yeah.
make that decision that, oh, I've been making a decision from a survival place.
Right.
And now I'm going to be making this decision from a living life, more thriving, choice-based place.
Right. Yeah.
And
And it's
that's
like
so different.
I can't do it if I'm trying to do it for current me. Well, current me is
Hmm.
freaking the fuck out. Like current me is in survival mode. Like current me is
Yeah.
in a state of fight or flight. So if I try to do it for current me, I'm gonna still reinforce that. But if I'm doing it for future me, that's
Mm.
different. Yeah, that's like the different.
Yep.
That's the layer
Absolutely.
of like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's cool. Yeah. It's thank you. And I also again, it's like you get in this habit too of like once you do it enough, it's almost like you can catch it before it really starts to lock you in,
Yes.
right? And then you're
Yes.
just like, all right, well, I'm feeling it starting to creep in. I'm not going to wait until I'm in full rumination mode where I have to pull that out of my pocket, right? Of like making it identity based. Instead of doing that, I can just go on a walk right now and just dispel it, you know?
Absolutely. Or, sometimes like at work for me, it's like, okay, I can feel that this is coming up. I got 20 minutes. I'm setting a timer for 20 minutes. At 20 minutes, I'm going to fake a phone call and go outside and pace around my van for a little bit. And
Yeah.
like that, it works for me where it's like, I know in this situation, like I got to interact and interface with this customer. I know I got to like start the work so that they feel confident in what's been going on.
Hmm.
But like I need that break, and it doesn't look like me going out and eating lunch. It looks like me on the phone taking a walk. But really, that's a break for me. So I'm
Right.
building that in. Like I got 20 minutes before, yeah, I could sit here and try to finish it. But if I take this walk and this 5 minute break, my mind is gonna relax and I'm gonna do it in such a more focused and clear way that it's going to be faster than if I just sat here and tried to pound it out.
Right. Yeah. And it's also like and when you start doing this too, it's okay if you feel unsafe. It's okay if you don't feel it's okay if it feels uncomfortable too, right? Because again, it's like you trick yourself into thinking like, oh, you're so uncomfortable when you're going through these anxious moments and shit like that. Yeah, you know what's more uncomfortable? Giving yourself peace,
Mm, 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 mm.
actually
So
allowing yourself to calm down.
this is one of those areas too where nuance is I think really powerful and necessary. But like I break that down into uneasiness. Like you're
Yeah.
gonna feel uneasy. Like that's the broad arching term. And then for my discernment, I use discomfort and uncomfortable as two different points. And this comes from
Mm-hmm.
like sports, where if I felt uncomfortable, I was probably at a point where I was about to hurt or injure myself.
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel discomfort, that means that I'm building something and I'm getting stronger, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not pushing myself to the point of hurt. So in the self-growth mindset of that, if I'm uncomfortable, I'm probably in a space where I know it's not healthy for me. If I
Okay.
feel uncomfortable, I'm in this space of like I'm about to repeat a pattern. It just looks different from
Mm.
how the old patterns looked, right?
Yeah.
If I feel discomfort, it's because I'm putting myself in a different space and I don't know what to expect.
I really like that framing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I got that from my own personal experience, like being in a relationship with somebody where I felt uncomfortable. It was really chaotic. it was often me standing up for myself, like for the first time in a relationship, like healthily standing up for myself.
Hmm.
And then this person coming back saying everything that I needed to hear and be like, okay, yeah, like I'm supposed to be uneasy. I'm supposed to be uncomfortable for growth, right? But then about, I don't know, honestly, like 8 months later, I recognized like how much more anxiety my life was, how
Right.
much my life felt like it took a step back
Yeah.
from where I was. And then it's like, oh, I'm putting myself in this situation and I'm actually
Right.
abandoning myself.
Yeah. I
Like
love that you,
for real.
I love that you said that too, because I have this like theory that, and this is like the phase of my life that I'm in right now too. It's like, so as I'm building this business, my whole life, I feel like I've learned, it's been reinforced that I have to suffer in order to be successful.
Yes.
That's like a limiting belief that, is so ingrained. Yeah. And we're gonna probably,
I'm
get some
laughing
people
about
off
it because
here.
I felt that same thing, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
laughing because
Yeah.
I feel it. I feel it.
Yeah. And it's like, and what's so crazy is I had this moment a couple weeks ago where I hit like a record breaking week for my business. And it was, yeah,
Congratulations. Hold on
thank
one
you.
second. Congratulations. Take that in. You deserve it.
Thank you.
Hell yeah.
And I've processed it. However, I freaked out,
Yeah.
right? Because it was like, oh, now I got to replicate this again next week, and what started to happen is I started to find myself like put myself in a survival state because there's still a part of me that thought that, oh, like I have to keep suffering in order to keep gaining more. And now I created this affirmation or this mantra where, and I think it's something you'll really like to remind myself of those times because I don't think I'm climbing the mountain anymore. I think I'm learning how to go down the mountain right now in this point in my life. I think I'm learning how to make things easier for myself. And the mantra that I tell myself to remind myself of this is pain comes from purpose, suffering comes from self-sabotage.
That that is yeah, I mean just that is a great way to be able to look at these two things that are so ingrained in, in being raised as, a masculine presenting person, as a man in this society of so much of the world, people experience this who are raised as boys and men, and it's you have to give up a lot. Like you have to suffer to live a good life. Like that's
Mhm.
ultimately that's what we are taught.
Yeah,
And this is like after talking to thousands of people that have had that same experience that when you break it all down, that's basically what we get taught.
right,
And so reframing it that pain is going to be a part of it because guess what? Life be lifing.
right.
Life is going to happen.
Yeah,
Pain is going to be a part of it. And if you are doing your purpose and you're changing things and you're breaking these generational cycles, if you're breaking the things that you were taught, if you're breaking what was holding you down before, there's going to be pain associated with that.
yeah. And that's necessary.
And
Right? Just like working out, right? Like
yeah,
it's painful to break down your muscle tissue, but if you do it right,
yep,
right, then it's going to build stronger. The
yeah,
problem becomes, and this ties directly to self-worth, and I think you're really going to like this too, because especially so I tend to work with people pleasers too, right? So high achievers who chase success by default are people pleasers because if you don't know who you are, right, then by default, you are not living by your own values, you're living by other people's, right? And usually, when like the overachiever, high achievers who are doing it from a place of chasing success and not prioritizing fulfillment, like they're pursuing it to fill a void or because they think that that's going to give them an identity, right? And what's so interesting about that is high achievers want to serve the world, right? They want to do good. They want to provide a service. They want to provide value to people. And here's the thing about that. If you don't have self-worth and then you try to serve, if you don't have self-worth and you try to provide value, that's the same thing as trying to withdraw from a bank account that doesn't have any money in it. What happens when you do that, when you don't serve from a place of personal value and personal power, but you serve from a place of needing to or validation or other people's values and like feeling obligated to because that's your identity, what happens is you put yourself in energetic debt. So it's not the service, it's not the want to serve others and help others that's wrong. Here's a really hot take, and I hope people are okay with it, and I don't really care if they're not. People pleasers are liars.
Yeah.
They lie to themselves because they tell themselves that the reason why they are trying to please others is to make them feel better or to serve them. When in reality, that's not why they're doing it.
Hmm.
They're doing it to overcompensate for not feeling worthy themselves, which is why people pleasers get taken advantage of. If you're somebody who's confident and you're somebody who has high self-worth, you don't allow people to step all over you because you know you're worthy and you know you're valuable. Because when you know who you are, you can set boundaries. You can say no because you have a reason to. But if you're a people pleaser, right, or you're somebody who wants to serve and wants to give, but you don't know how to give to yourself, there's no reason for you to say no. There's no reason for you to not overcommit your time. There's no reason for you to not drain yourself. And that's the piece. That's where the suffering comes in, right? That's where the self-sabotage comes in. And again, we're so good at being like, well, I'm doing this to help others. And it's like, are you?
That's a that's a bucket of cold water for people. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things like I've had to be honest with myself when I've had moments of I actually talked with a client about this because I see her doing things that I've done,
Hmm.
which is I want to be there. I want to be the strong friend. I want to be there for other people. Well, why do I want to be there with for other people? And it's what you're talking about, but addressing it in a little bit different is, well, I want to avoid
Hmm.
looking at myself and being there for
Hmm.
myself.
Yeah.
And so
I want to
it's that
escape.
avoidance technique. It's that, oh yeah, I want to escape it. Yes. Like, oh, if I'm focused on everybody else, I don't have time to focus on me.
Right.
Oh, but and it's hidden, it's masked as this thing that is a good thing because it is a good thing
Hmm.
until it's not. Until you recognize that, oh, I'm hurting people who are close to me. I'm hurting people that those are around. And for parents out there, I want you to recognize the disservice you're doing to your children by doing this to your children.
Hmm.
You are actually parenting from a wound and you're passing that wound on to your kids. And so everything that you don't necessarily like about yourself, you're giving to them.
Yeah.
And so if that's where you're parenting from, that's what you're going to get instilled in them, whether you do it overtly or not. It doesn't make you a bad person. What it
Right.
does, though, is it makes you ignorant to the point that, okay, this is now willful.
Right. Yeah, and that's such an important point to understand for people too. What I'm not saying is there's something wrong with you.
Yes.
What I am saying is that when we are motivated from a place of shame, fear, guilt, anger, or lack, lower vibrational emotions, which simply just means emotions that don't reflect who we really want to be or who we are, automatically what happens, I just lost my train of thought. Hold on. Automatically what happens when we do that is that's not when it doesn't come from a place of wholeness, it's destructive. Right? When it doesn't come from a place of who we really are. Oh, here's what I was going to say. There's nothing wrong with you. But when you're moving from that energy, the patterns and behaviors that you're engaging in are not a reflection of you. And that's the problem. The problem is not that there's something wrong with you, it's that your patterns and behaviors do not reflect who you really are. That's the problem. Because if you were doing things based off your true values and who you want to be and who you're meant to be, it wouldn't be destructive. It wouldn't come from a place of fear or scarcity or lack or anger, right? It would come from a place of self-love. It would come from a place of self-worth, of courage, of confidence. And no human being will ever get to the point where everything is driven by self-love. That's impossible and it won't happen. However, if you can raise the ratio of things you're doing out of self-love and make it greater than the things you're doing out of shame and guilt and fear and things that aren't you, then you're gonna have a pretty good life. And so will your kids, and so will the people around you.
Ooh, that was good. Brennan, on that note, if people were interested in learning about your coaching, if people were interested in following you, what's the best way they could do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have a website. It's a www.build-your-power.com. So it has I have a newsletter that you can sign up for on there, talk about some of this stuff. I There's information on my one-on-one coaching. I also do team workshops for purpose-driven organizations if you want to raise awareness on what burnout really is. This podcast episode, I went way deeper than just burnout. So front end solution is burnout prevention. So if you know people in your life who are dealing with time management issues, who have a hard time with saying no, who are feeling drained, who feel like work is consuming their life, don't worry, I'm going to meet them where they are. But what I actually do for people and how I'm going to help them with that, my back end solution is I help them operate differently. I help them become a version of themselves that don't have to operate in fight or flight or survival mode. So go to my website, and I would say that's the best way to reach me. And yeah, RJ, thank you so much, man, for having me on. This is awesome.
Oh, this was so much fun. And it was one of those things like, yeah, I knew it was going to be good. And there were so many nuggets for people to be able to take and be able to do something with. And that's something that is exciting. And please go, give Brennan, sign up for his newsletter. Just like all of this, share this episode with somebody who you know will benefit from it. And um, just know that, we're out here not telling you how to live, but showing that there's another way that you could. And that's really that's that message. So thanks for being here, Brendan. And everybody out there, let's try to be better tomorrow than we were today. At least we don't make it. We tried. Have a great week, everybody. Love you.